Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as thunder rolled across the Montana sky. The veterinary clinic had been quiet all day, which was normal for a Tuesday evening in the small mountain town of Pine Ridge. Most folks around here knew to keep their animals inside during storms like this one. Lightning cracked overhead, and Jake decided it was time to close up and head home to his small cabin behind the clinic. He was turning off the lights in the examination room when something crashed into his backyard with a sound like a freight train hitting a mountain. The entire building shook, windows rattled, and his coffee mug fell off the counter. Jake grabbed a flashlight and his emergency medical kit out of habit. Living this far from the nearest hospital meant he sometimes had to patch up people as well as animals. The rain was coming down hard as he stepped outside. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness and landed on something that made him stop breathing for a moment. A massive creature lay in the crater where his vegetable garden used to be. It looked like the dragons from old fairy tales, but real and hurt and bleeding. The thing was easily 20 feet long, with dark scales that seemed to shimmer even in the rain. One wing was bent at a wrong angle, and green blood was pooling around several deep cuts. Jake stood there for a full minute, rain soaking through his shirt. His brain kept trying to process what he was seeing. Dragons were not supposed to be real. But the creature in front of him was breathing, bleeding, and making low sounds of pain that reminded him of injured horses. His veterinary training kicked in before his common sense could stop him. He approached slowly, the way he would with any hurt animal. The dragon's eyes opened as he got closer. They were intelligent eyes, not like any animal he had ever treated. There was something almost human in the way they looked at him. The creature tried to lift its head but fell back with what sounded like a groan. Jake could see the dragon was in serious pain. Its whole body was shaking, and it kept pressing one clawed hand against its head. The gesture was so familiar that Jake almost smiled despite the situation. He had seen that exact movement in countless animals, and even people suffering from severe headaches or migraines. The creature's breathing was getting faster and more shallow. Jake knew that meant shock was setting in. He had to do something quickly, or watch this impossible being die in his backyard. He ran back to the clinic and grabbed every large animal medical supply he could carry: bandages, antiseptic, pain medication, and his largest suture kit. When he returned, the dragon was looking at him with those strange, intelligent eyes. Jake held up his hands to show he meant no harm, then slowly began cleaning the worst wounds. The creature winced, but did not try to stop him. The cuts were deep but clean, probably from some kind of metal. Jake worked quickly, applying antiseptic and bandaging what he could reach. But the dragon kept pressing its head and making those pain sounds. Jake had dealt with enough concussions and brain injuries in large animals to recognize the signs. This was not just physical pain from the wounds. This was something neurological, like the worst migraine possible. Jake thought about the medications he had. Most of his strong painkillers were designed for animals much smaller than this dragon, but then he remembered the bottle of aspirin he kept for his own headaches. It was a simple over-the-counter medication, nothing fancy. But for severe head pain, sometimes simple was better than complicated. He ran back inside and grabbed the bottle of aspirin from his desk drawer. The tablets were large, and he figured the dragon's size meant it could handle a much bigger dose than a human. He took out 6 tablets and walked back to the creature. Getting the dragon to take medicine was easier than he expected. When Jake held out the tablets, those intelligent eyes seemed to understand. The creature opened its mouth, revealing teeth, like sword blades, and let Jake place the aspirin on its tongue. It swallowed without hesitation. Jake sat back on his heels and waited. He had no idea if human medicine would work on whatever this creature was, but it was the only thing he could think of to try. The rain continued to fall, and lightning still flashed across the sky. After about 20 minutes, something changed. The dragon's breathing became slower and deeper. The shaking stopped. Most importantly, it stopped pressing its head and making those pain sounds. The creature actually seemed to relax for the first time since Jake had found it. The dragon looked at Jake with what could only be described as amazement. It struggled to sit up, moving much more easily than before. When it spoke, Jake nearly fell backward in shock. The voice was deep and rough, but the words were in perfect English. "The pain is gone," the dragon said. "For the first time in many cycles, the pain is completely gone. What did you give me, small healer?" Jake found his voice after a moment. "Aspirin," he managed to say. "Just regular aspirin for headaches." The dragon stared at him for a long moment. "Aspirin," it repeated, as if the word was made of gold. "I am called Zethkar. I am a warrior of the Draconian Empire. My ship was damaged in battle, and the neural feedback from the failing systems has caused me agony for days. Your simple medicine has done what our most advanced medical technology could not." Zethkar reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small metallic device that seemed to glow with its own light. "I must contact my fleet and report this miracle. But first, small healer Jake, I give you this communication device as thanks. You have helped me more than you can possibly understand." Before Jake could ask any questions, Zethkar pressed the device into his hands. The dragon then spread its wings. The injured one apparently healed enough to fly. With a powerful downbeat that nearly knocked Jake over, Zethkar launched into the stormy sky and disappeared into the clouds. Jake stood alone in his ruined garden, holding an alien device, wondering if he had just changed his life forever. 3 days passed, and Jake Morrison tried to convince himself it had all been a dream. The crater in his backyard said otherwise. So did the strange metallic device that hummed softly on his kitchen table and seemed to glow brighter every few hours. He had been afraid to touch it since Zethkar left, but it was definitely not from any Earth technology he knew about. On Thursday morning, Jake was treating Mrs. Patterson's cat when every phone in Pine Ridge started ringing at once. Emergency. Broadcasts interrupted radio and television programs. The news was impossible to believe, but Jake looked out his clinic window and saw the proof hanging in the blue Montana sky. Massive ships floated above the mountains. They were dark and sleek, shaped somewhat like the dragon he had helped 3 nights ago. There were dozens of them, each one easily the size of a football stadium. They cast shadows over the entire valley, and Jake could hear the low hum of their engines even through the clinic walls. The president was on every channel within an hour, asking people to remain calm while government officials tried to establish communication with the alien visitors. The military was mobilizing, but the ships had not made any aggressive moves. They just hung there in the sky, waiting. Jake's phone rang constantly. News reporters somehow got his number and wanted to interview him about the crater in his yard. He told them all that a meteorite had hit during the storm, which was technically true if you counted alien spaceships as meteorites. But deep in his gut, Jake knew these ships were connected to Zethkar. That afternoon, his suspicions were confirmed in the most dramatic way possible. A smaller ship detached from the largest vessel and flew straight toward Pine Ridge. It landed in the field behind Jake's clinic with barely a sound, much gentler than Zethkar's crash landing. Jake was watching from his window when 3 figures emerged from the ship. 2 of them looked like Zethkar, tall and reptilian with those intelligent eyes. The 3rd figure was human, wearing a military uniform with patches Jake did not recognize. They walked directly to his front door and knocked politely. Jake opened the door and found himself face to face with the human in uniform. She was a woman in her 30s with short brown hair and the kind of calm expression that came from dealing with impossible situations on a regular basis. "Dr. Morrison," she said, "I'm Dr. Lisa Park from the Centers for Disease Control. These are Commander Vextar and Science Officer Thalzek of the Draconian Empire. We need to talk to you about what happened 3 nights ago." Jake invited them. Inside, though his small waiting room was not designed for visitors who were 8 feet tall and had wings. Commander Vextar looked around the clinic with obvious interest, examining Jake's medical equipment and animal care supplies. "You are the healer who helped warrior Zethkar," Commander Vextar said in that same deep, rough voice Jake remembered. "He has told us of your miracle cure for the neural syndrome that has plagued our people for generations." Dr. Park pulled out a tablet and began showing Jake charts and graphs. "Dr. Morrison, the Draconians have been suffering from a genetic condition that causes severe neurological pain. It affects about 60% of their population and has limited their effectiveness in many areas, especially military operations, that require extended concentration." Jake looked at the medical data on the tablet. It looked similar to migraine patterns he had seen in veterinary journals, just much more severe and constant. "So when I gave Zethkar aspirin for his headache..." "You cured a condition that has stumped draconian medical science for over 1,000 years, Dr. Park finished. Acetylsalicylic acid, common aspirin, has properties that perfectly counteract the neural inflammation their condition causes. What we consider basic pain relief is, to them, a miracle cure." Science Officer Thalzek leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. "Dr. Morrison, may I ask how you knew to administer this particular compound? Our medical computers ran millions of simulations and never identified it as a potential treatment." Jake almost laughed. "I didn't know anything about your condition. Zethkar was holding his head and acting like he had the worst headache in the world, so I gave him headache medicine. It's what any doctor would do." The 3 visitors exchanged looks that Jake could not interpret. Commander Vextar spoke carefully. "Dr. Morrison, the Draconian Empire would like to propose a medical trade agreement with your people. We offer selected technologies and knowledge about the galactic community in exchange for access to your pharmaceutical compounds and medical expertise." Before Jake could respond, his communication device on the kitchen table began glowing much brighter and emitting a series of tones. Thalzek looked at it with surprise. "Commander, that device is receiving a priority military transmission," Thalzek said. "From the Hegemony battle fleet." Dr. Park looked worried. "What's the Hegemony?" Commander Vexitar's expression became grim. "Our enemies in a war that has lasted 3 centuries. They are a coalition of militaristic species who maintain power through superior technology and the fact that our neural syndrome has weakened us in long campaigns." The device continued beeping, and Jake picked it up without thinking. Suddenly, his small clinic was filled with a holographic image of another alien creature. This one looked nothing like the dragon-like Draconians. It was insectoid, with multiple eyes and mandibles that clicked when it spoke. "Draconian Empire," the creature said in a voice like grinding metal. "We are Supreme Marshal Krixtal of the Galactic Hegemony. We are aware of your new alliance with the primitive species on this world. We will not allow any shift in the balance of power. You have 48 hours to withdraw from this system, or we will consider it an act of war." The hologram disappeared, leaving Jake's clinic in uncomfortable silence. Commander Vextar looked at Jake with something that might have been regret. "Dr. Morrison, I fear your act of kindness toward Zethkar has placed your entire species in danger. The Hegemony will not allow humans to provide us with medical aid that could change the outcome of our war." Dr. Park was already on her phone, speaking rapidly to someone about military readiness and threat assessment. Jake looked around his small clinic with its comfortable chairs and posters of healthy pets, and realized his quiet life was about to become very complicated. "So what happens now?" Jake asked. Commander Vextar stood up, his massive form filling the small room. "Now, Dr. Morrison, humanity must decide if they will stand with us against the Hegemony or if they will abandon the medical alliance to protect themselves. Either choice is understandable." Jake thought about Zethkar, injured and in pain, trusting a complete stranger to help him. He thought about the aspirin that had seemed like such a small thing, but had apparently changed the balance of power in an interstellar war. "Commander," Jake said, "I gave Zethkar aspirin because he was hurt and I could help. If the hegemony wants to make that into a war, then I guess we'll have to deal with that too." Outside, more ships were appearing in the sky. Jake Morrison had never expected to see military helicopters landing in Pine Ridge, but the past week had been full of surprises. The small town was now crawling with government officials, scientists, and soldiers. The local diner had run out of coffee twice, and Mrs. Henderson was renting rooms to reporters at $50 a night. Jake sat in what used to be his quiet clinic, now converted into an impromptu command center. Captain Nora Blake, a Space Force officer who looked like she belonged in a science fiction movie rather than rural Montana, was explaining the situation to a room full of people Jake had never imagined meeting. "Intelligence reports confirm that the hegemony is mobilizing their Silence Corps," Captain Blake said, pointing at images on a large screen that the military had installed yesterday. "These are elite units specializing in what they call species A. Termination? They've used them 12 times in the past century to eliminate civilizations they consider threats." Jake looked at the pictures of destroyed worlds, empty cities, and silent planets. The scale of destruction was hard to comprehend. Science Officer Thalzek, who had been working with human researchers for the past 3 days, made a sound of distress. "Captain Blake, how long do we have?" asked Dr. Amy Chen, a biochemist who had arrived from the CDC with equipment Jake could not even pronounce. "Our best estimate is 72 hours before their advanced scouts reach Earth," Captain Blake replied. "The main assault force will arrive approximately 6 hours later." Jake had been learning about galactic politics faster than he ever wanted. 2. The hegemony controlled about 40% of known space through a combination of superior technology and brutal efficiency. They had maintained their power partly because their main opponents, the Draconian Empire, had been weakened by the neural syndrome that affected so many of their population. "Dr. Morrison," Thalzek said, "we have discovered something remarkable about your species' biochemistry. The compounds you naturally produce are incredibly rare in the galaxy. Aspirin is just one example. Your bodies create dozens of chemical combinations that can treat conditions we thought were incurable." Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. "We've been running tests all week. Human saliva contains compounds that can heal draconian bone fractures in minutes instead of weeks. Our stomach acid neutralizes a poison that kills 3 different hegemony species. Even our sweat has antibiotic properties that work on alien bacteria." Jake tried to process this information. "So humans are basically walking medicine cabinets for aliens?" "More than that," Commander Vextar said, entering the clinic with 3 other Draconian officers. "Your people are evolutionary anomalies. Most worlds develop life along similar chemical pathways. Earth followed a completely unique path, creating biological compounds that are miraculous to the rest of the galaxy." Captain Blake pulled up more intelligence reports. "This is why the hegemony considers us such a threat. If humans ally with the Draconian Empire and provide medical support, it could completely change the balance of the war. Healthy Draconian warriors are apparently formidable opponents." "Formidable is an understatement," Commander Vextar said, with what might have been pride. "Before the neural syndrome weakened us, Draconian forces were legendary throughout the galaxy. One of our warriors could face 10 hegemony soldiers and emerge victorious." Jake looked around the room at all these people discussing interstellar war because he had given someone aspirin for a headache. It felt surreal, but the military equipment and alien visitors made it impossible to deny. "What exactly is this Silence Corps?" Jake asked. Captain Blake's expression became grim. "Elite hegemony commandos trained specifically for planetary sterilization. They infiltrate target worlds, eliminate key individuals and infrastructure, then call in the main fleet for cleanup. They're efficient, ruthless, and they've never failed a mission." Thalzek accessed his portable computer, showing images of insectoid creatures in advanced armor. Silence Corp's operatives are enhanced with cybernetic implants and biological modifications. They can survive in almost any environment and adapt their tactics to counter local defenses. Most species never even realize they're under attack until it's too late. How do they usually operate? Dr. Chen asked. They target leadership, communication systems, and military assets simultaneously, Commander Vexitar explained. But in this case, their primary target will likely be Dr. Morrison and any facilities producing or researching human medical compounds. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Montana weather. So they're coming here specifically to kill me? You and anyone else who might be able to replicate your medical treatments, Captain Blake confirmed. Intelligence suggests they'll also target pharmaceutical companies, research hospitals, and government officials involved in the alliance negotiations. Dr. Chen looked determined. Then we need to distribute the medical formulations as widely as possible before they arrive. If the treatments are available globally, eliminating a few key people won't stop the alliance. Already in progress, Captain Blake said. We've sent the aspirin synthesis process to every major pharmaceutical company on Earth. Military medical units are being equipped with the basic compounds that help draconian physiology, but we need time to mass-produce everything. Commander. Vextar stood up, his massive form imposing even in the crowded clinic. Time we may not have. Hegemony scouts move faster than conventional fleets. They could arrive ahead of schedule. As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring from the military communications equipment. A young soldier ran into the clinic, looking panicked. Captain Blake, we have multiple unknown contacts entering the solar system. They're moving too fast to be Hegemony main fleet, and they're not responding to any communications. Captain Blake cursed in a language Jake had never heard before. Silence Corps advance team. They're 18 hours early. She grabbed her communication device. All units, initiate Defense Protocol 7. This is not a drill. Jake watched as his quiet clinic transformed into a war room. Soldiers ran to positions. Scientists grabbed their research, and draconian warriors began checking weapons that looked like they belonged in a fantasy novel. Thalzek approached Jake, holding a small device. Dr. Morrison, this is a personal shield generator. It will protect you from most hegemony weapons, but only for a limited time. Stay close to our warriors. Jake took the device, feeling its alien weight in his hands. Thalzek, what are our chances? The draconian scientist looked at him with those intelligent reptilian eyes. Dr. Morrison, the Silence Corps has never faced humans before. They do not understand your species' adaptability or your alliance with us. That may be the advantage we need. Outside, Jake could see draconian ships moving into defensive positions around Pine Ridge. Human military vehicles were arriving from all directions. His small town was about to become the center of humanity's first interstellar battle. Jake looked at the aspirin bottle still sitting on his desk. The same bottle that had started this entire situation. In a few hours, alien commandos would arrive with the specific goal of killing him and preventing humanity from joining the galactic community. Well, Jake said to nobody in particular, this is definitely not what I expected when I became a veterinarian. Commander Vexitar heard him and made a sound that might have been laughter. Dr. Morrison, very few species expect their first contact with the galaxy to begin with giving medicine to a wounded stranger. But perhaps that is exactly why humanity deserves to join us among the stars. The attack began at 3 in the morning with no warning except for dogs throughout Pine Ridge suddenly going silent. Jake Morrison woke up in his clinic, where he had been sleeping since the military declared it too dangerous for him to go home. The first sign of trouble was when all the lights went out at once. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red light. Captain Nora Blake's voice crackled over the communication system. Silence Corps infiltration confirmed. Multiple contacts throughout the town. All units engage. Jake rolled out of the makeshift bed in his examination room and grabbed the shield generator Thalzek had given him. Outside his window, he could see shapes moving through the darkness that definitely were not human or draconian. The hegemony. Commandos moved like liquid shadow, flowing from building to building with unnatural speed. Colonel Pete Hayes, the Marine officer in charge of ground defense, burst through the clinic door with 4 soldiers. "Doc, we need to move you to the secure bunker now." Before Jake could respond, something crashed through the clinic's front window. The creature that came through looked like a nightmare version of the insect alien from the hologram, but bigger and covered in armor that seemed to shift and change color to match its surroundings. Multiple red eyes focused on Jake, and mandibles clicked in what might have been satisfaction. Colonel Hayes opened fire with weapons that made sounds Jake had never heard before. Energy beams struck the commando, but its armor absorbed most of the damage. The creature moved impossibly fast, crossing the room in a single leap. Commander Vextar appeared from the back room, roaring a battle cry that shook the windows. The draconian warrior slammed into the commando with claws extended, and the 2 aliens went crashing through Jake's medical cabinet. Bottles of medicine and surgical instruments scattered everywhere. "Move, Doc!" Colonel Hayes shouted, grabbing Jake's arm. "We can't hold this position." They ran through the clinic's back door into a war zone. Pine Ridge looked nothing like the quiet mountain town it had been that morning. Energy weapons lit up the night sky. Buildings were on fire, and explosions echoed off the mountains. Jake could see human soldiers working alongside draconian warriors, their different fighting styles surprisingly complementary. A hegemony commando dropped from the roof of the post office, landing directly in their path. This one looked different from the first, more reptilian, but with the same shifting armor and too many weapons. Colonel Hayes pushed Jake behind a parked car and engaged the creature. Jake watched in amazement as the Marine used tactics he had never seen before. When energy weapons failed to penetrate the commando's adaptive armor, Colonel Hayes switched to an old-fashioned shotgun loaded with what looked like rock salt. The simple projectiles punched through the alien armor like it was paper. "Adaptive defenses," Colonel Hayes explained while reloading. "They're designed to counter advanced energy weapons, not primitive kinetic force." More commandos were converging on their position. Jake could see at least 6 of them moving through the smoke and darkness. Their armor was adapting to the human weapons now, becoming thicker and more reflective. Thalzek appeared beside them, carrying equipment Jake did not recognize. "Colonel Hayes, Dr. Morrison must reach the research facility. Dr. Chen has synthesized enough medical compounds to supply our entire fleet, but the commandos are targeting the building." Through the chaos, Jake could see the temporary research facility that had been set up in the high school gymnasium. It was under heavy attack, with at least a dozen commandos trying to break through the defenses. Explosions lit up the buildings. "Windows! How do we get through that?" Jake asked. Colonel Hayes smiled grimly. "Doc, you're about to learn why humans have a reputation for being crazy. What happened next would be talked about in military academies throughout the galaxy for years to come." Colonel Hayes coordinated with Commander Vextar to create what he called a confusion assault. Human soldiers began using tactics that made no sense to anyone who had studied conventional warfare. They threw Molotov cocktails made from Mrs. Henderson's homemade whiskey. They used fireworks from the local general store as improvised flashbang. Grenades. When their high-tech weapons overheated, they switched to hunting rifles, baseball bats, and, in one memorable case, a chainsaw that Zethkar wielded like a sword after his energy weapon failed. The hegemony commandos, for all their advanced training in adaptive technology, had never faced opponents who treated war like an improvisation exercise. Their tactical computers could not predict what humans would do next because the humans themselves did not know. Jake found himself running through his own town, dodging energy beams and explosions, while aliens fought a battle that would determine the fate of his species. The shield generator protected him from a blast that vaporized the stop sign next to him, but he could feel the device getting warmer with each hit. They reached the research facility just as Dr. Amy Chen was evacuating, with cases full of synthesized medicine. "Jake," she called out, "the compounds are ready, but we need to get them to the draconian ships before the Commandos destroy everything." A new sound cut through the battle noise, a deep humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jake looked up to see the largest hegemony commando he had encountered yet descending from the sky on what looked like metallic wings. This one was clearly the leader. Bigger and more heavily armed than the others, the commando landed in the middle of the street between Jake and the research facility. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal mixed with breaking glass. "Human. Healer," it said, multiple red eyes focusing on Jake. "I am Cathara, strike leader of the Silence Corps. Your interference in galactic affairs ends now." Jake looked around at the battle raging through his hometown. Human and draconian fighters were holding their own, but barely. The research facility was burning, and he could see more hegemony ships approaching in the distance. "Cathara," Jake said, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. "I gave someone aspirin for a headache. If that interferes with your galactic affairs, maybe your affairs are the problem." The commando leader tilted its head, mandibles clicking. "You do not understand the consequences of your actions, primitive creature. The balance of power cannot be allowed to shift." The balance of power? Jake felt anger rising, something he rarely experienced. "You're talking about destroying my entire species because we can make medicine that helps people. What kind of galactic community is that?" Before Cathara could respond, Zethkar dropped from the sky behind the commando leader. The draconian warrior looked different than when Jake had first met him. His scales were brighter, his movements more fluid and powerful. The aspirin had not just cured his headache, it had restored him to full fighting capability. "Strike leader, Cathara," Zethkar said. "You face not just humans today, but draconians fighting at full strength for the first time in generations. Are you prepared for that challenge?" Cathara spun around, energy weapons charging. "One warrior cannot change the outcome of this battle." Zethkar smiled, showing teeth like sword blades. "Who said there was only one?" The sky filled with draconian. Warriors descending like avenging angels. Dozens of them, all moving with the fluid power of beings no longer crippled by constant neurological pain. They had been taking the human medical compounds throughout the week, and Jake was seeing the results. The tide of battle turned in minutes. Hegemony commandos who had been dominating the fight suddenly found themselves outmatched by opponents, fighting at levels they had never encountered before. The Silence Corps, for all their reputation, had never faced healthy draconian warriors supported by human adaptability and stubbornness. Cathara looked around at the changing battle and focused on Jake with what might have been respect. "Perhaps we underestimated your species, human healer. Maybe next time don't try to kill someone for helping a hurt person," Jake replied. The commando leader's armor was changing again, this time to a white color that Jake somehow understood meant surrender. "This engagement is concluded. Withdrawal protocols initiated." As quickly as they had arrived, the hegemony commandos vanished into the night. Jake stood in the smoking ruins of his hometown's main street, surrounded by human soldiers and alien warriors, holding a bottle of synthesized aspirin that had just changed the balance of galactic power. Colonel Hayes approached, grinning despite a cut on his forehead. "Doc, I think we just won humanity's first interstellar war." Jake looked around at his friends and neighbors emerging from hiding, at the draconian warriors who were already helping with cleanup efforts, and at the stars, visible through the smoke above Pine Ridge. "Colonel," Jake said, "I think we just got started." 6 months after the Battle of Pine Ridge, Jake Morrison stood in his new clinic and marveled at how much his life had changed. The building was 10 times larger than his original veterinary office, with sections designed for treating species he was still learning to pronounce. Through the windows, he could see construction crews putting the finishing touches on Earth's first civilian spaceport. His current patient was a young draconian who had caught what humans would call a common cold during a cultural exchange program. Jake was treating her with honey, lemon tea, and children's cough syrup, remedies that draconian medical science considered revolutionary advances. "Dr. Morrison," the young patient said in carefully practiced English, "my teacher says you are the human who changed the galaxy with aspirin. Is that really true?" Jake smiled as he handed her the tea. "I helped someone who was hurt. Everything else just sort of happened after that." Dr. Amy Chen entered the examination room carrying a tablet full of test results. Her work over the past months had transformed her from a CDC researcher into the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies medicine. "Jake, the latest batch of synthesis. Results are incredible. We've identified 47 human compounds that treat previously incurable conditions across 12 different species. The scope of human medical utility had surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. Simple things like vitamin C prevented a degenerative disease in the hegemony's former client species. Caffeine enhanced memory formation in several reptilian races. Even something as basic as soap had antibacterial properties that worked on alien pathogens. Admiral Sam Rodriguez arrived for his weekly briefing, still wearing the uniform of the new Joint Human-Draconian Fleet. The partnership had grown, from emergency cooperation during the Silence Corps attack into a full military and scientific alliance. Ships with hybrid crews now patrolled sectors of space that had been contested for centuries. "Jake," Admiral Rodriguez said, "I wanted to give you the latest intelligence reports. The hegemony has requested formal peace negotiations for the first time in 300 years. Turns out losing their elite commando force and facing healthy draconian warriors has changed their perspective on continued warfare." The defeat of the Silence Corps had sent shockwaves through hegemony space. For the first time in their history, their supposedly unstoppable special forces had been outfought by a combination of primitive human tactics and restored draconian combat effectiveness. Military analysts throughout the galaxy were studying recordings of the battle, trying to understand how chainsaw-wielding aliens and marines with shotguns had overwhelmed advanced cybernetic commandos. Thalzek entered the clinic carrying his latest research data. The draconian scientist had become Jake's closest collaborator, working to catalog and understand the full extent of human biochemical advantages. "Dr. Morrison, I have completed the analysis of your latest blood samples. Your species continues to produce compounds we have never encountered. This latest one appears to enhance bone density in zero-gravity environments." "That's probably just calcium and vitamin D," Jake said. "Every human has those." "Every human is a walking medical miracle, by galactic standards," Thalzek replied. "Your evolutionary path created biological solutions to problems the rest of us solve with technology, if we solve them at all." Captain Nora Blake arrived with news from the Galactic Council. The political organization that governed most civilized species had been debating humanity's admission for months, a process usually taking decades. "Jake, Elder Vithron wants to speak with you personally before the final vote on human membership." The holographic communication system activated, showing an ancient-looking alien with features that reminded Jake of a wise old turtle. Elder Vithron had been part of the Galactic Council for over 2 centuries and had seen dozens of species join the galactic community. "Dr. Morrison," Elder Vithron said in a voice like rustling leaves, "your species' introduction to galactic civilization has been most unusual. Typically, new civilizations spend decades proving their technological advancement and cultural maturity. Humans proved their worth by giving medicine to strangers and fighting to protect their right to help others." Jake felt embarrassed by the attention. "Elder Vithron, I just did what seemed right at the time." "Indeed," the ancient alien replied. "And that may be exactly the quality the galaxy needs. The Council has voted to grant humanity full membership status along with a seat on the Medical Research Authority and shared governance of the humanitarian aid protocols. Dr. Kevin Park from the Nobel Prize Committee chose that moment to call, adding another surreal element to Jake's already impossible day. Dr. Morrison, the committee has reached its decision regarding your nomination. While your methods were unconventional, the impact of your work on interstellar medicine and peace cannot be ignored. Congratulations, you have been awarded this year's Nobel Prize in Medicine. Jake looked around his clinic at the assembled humans and aliens, at the advanced medical equipment alongside bottles of simple Earth medicines, at the vista of spaceships and construction crews visible through his windows. Dr. Park, I appreciate the honor, but I should mention that I'm primarily a veterinarian. I treat sick animals. Dr. Morrison, Dr. Park replied with amusement in his voice, I think your definition of animals has expanded considerably. After the communications ended, Jake found himself alone with Commander Vextar, who had been quietly observing the proceedings. The massive draconian warrior looked thoughtful. Dr. Morrison, do you ever regret the night you found Zethkar in your garden? Jake considered the question while cleaning medical instruments that would have seemed like magic 6 months ago. His quiet life as a small-town veterinarian was gone forever. He was now responsible for medical research that affected billions of beings across the galaxy. Earth was building its first interstellar fleet. Humanity had gained allies, enemies, and a place among the stars, all because he had given aspirin to someone in pain. Commander, Jake said finally, I became a veterinarian because I wanted to help creatures that were hurt. I never imagined those creatures might include alien dragons, but the principle is the same. Commander Vextar made the sound that served as draconian laughter. Perhaps that is why your species was ready to join the galactic community. You were already thinking beyond the boundaries of your own world. Jake walked over to his desk, where Zethkar's original communication device sat in a place of honor. Next to it was a newspaper clipping about the Nobel Prize announcement and a photo of him shaking hands with Admiral Rodriguez at the opening ceremony for the spaceport. But what caught his attention was the appointment book still open to today's schedule. His next patient was listed as Fluffy Morrison, domestic cat, annual checkup. Mrs. Patterson was bringing her pet in for routine vaccinations, just like she had been doing for years. Some things, Jake reflected with satisfaction, never changed. He was still a veterinarian in a small Montana town. He still treated sick and injured animals. The fact that some of those animals now came from other star systems just meant his practice had expanded a little. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors that reflected off the hull of a draconian transport ship coming in for landing. Construction lights were beginning to illuminate the new spaceport, where tomorrow would bring visitors from a dozen different worlds. Jake Morrison, small-town veterinarian and accidental galactic diplomat, picked up his medical bag and prepared for his next appointment. After all, Fluffy was waiting, and a good doctor never kept his patients waiting, no matter what planet they came from. The device on his desk chimed softly, displaying a message in draconian script that translated to, "Thank you, small healer, for showing us that the greatest medicines often come in the simplest forms." Jake smiled and turned off the lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patients, and probably new species he had never heard of. But tonight, he was just a veterinarian going home after a long day of helping creatures that needed care. Some things, he thought as he locked up the clinic, were exactly as they should be.